Everyone, please accept my deepest respects. Thank you for joining us today on our ongoing discussions and lectures on our most beloved Vrindavan Dham and many of our acharyas who spent time there. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatadeshatarine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, today I would like to speak on another personality who appeared in Caitanya Leela and who actually spent some significant time in Vrindavan Dham. And that is Virabhadra, or sometimes he's called Virachandra. And for those of you who are not aware of him, he was the illustrious son of Lord Nityananda by his wife Vasudha. We just mentioned him briefly in our last lecture about Janava Devi. You remember Janava and Vasudha were sisters who together married Lord Nityananda. Now, Virachandra is in a different category than all the other acharyas we've lectured on. For in the Gaur Gunadesha Dipika, we hear in text 67 that he's mentioned actually as an incarnation of Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. Kavi Karnapuna says that, quote, Virabhadra Goshai is non-different than Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The exact verse, Gaur Gunadesha Dipika, verse or text number 67, is as follows: Shankar Shana Sha Yo Viyaha Payobdhi Shayi Namkaha Saeva Virachandra Buk Chaitanya Bina Vigraha. Quote, the expansion of Shankarshan, who sleeps on the ocean of milk, Kshirodakshayi Vishnu, has become Virachandra, or Virabhadra, who is non-different from Chaitanya himself, unquote. Shastric quote. And in Caitanya Caritamrita, our beloved Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he explains just how important this personality of Virabhadra is. It's very sweet, because it's in Bengali. Caitanya Caritamrita is in Bengali. And it's said that Bengali is the, quote, the language of sweetness. Bangla Mishti Bhasya. They have that saying in Bengal. Bangla Mishti Bhasya. Bengali is the language of sweetness. So there in Adi Leela, chapter 11, verse number 8, a very authoritative verse about this personality, Virabhadra. Shri Virabhadra Goshai, Skanda Mahashaka, Tandra Upashaka Yata Ashankya Tadaleka. And I quote again. After Nityananda Prabhu, the greatest branch is Virabhadra Goshai, who also has innumerable branches and sub-branches. It is not possible to describe them all, unquote. And he stresses, Kaviraja Goswami stresses his importance even more in verse 10. Antare Ishvara Chesta Bahire Nirdhamba Chaitanya Bhakti Mandape Teno Mula Shtamba. Quote, Virabhadra is the main pillar in the hall of devotional service created by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He knew within himself that he acted as the Supreme Lord Vishnu, but externally he was prideless. So, listening to these verses, we might expect to hear or know more about this literal incarnation of God. But this last verse stresses that he was nirdhamba, He was without pride, which means he didn't want to advertise himself. So one reason we may not know him so well. But what's more, he didn't present himself as God, but rather he presented himself as a humble devotee of God. In the Adi-lila chapter 11, verse number 9, this is made very clear. Ishvara haya kahaya maha bhagavata Veda dharma titahana Veda dharmerata. Listen very carefully. A lot of verses, but they're important. Quote, although Virabhadra Goswami was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he presented himself as a devotee. And although the Supreme Godhead is transcendental to all Vedic conjunctions, he strictly followed the Vedic rituals. Something akin to our Caitanya Mahaprabhu. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's known as Chana Avatar. He's a hidden incarnation, in the sense that he also appeared, at least initially, as a devotee. And this is the kindness of these incarnations, you could say. Appearing as devotees, they show us the example of how we, as tiny jivas, can practice devotional service ourselves. We get a very practical understanding of, we follow these devotees, quote unquote. We're all born into ignorance. But by watching, even, you could say, imitating them in the beginning, like a child imitates the parents when they walk, imitating the actions of these great souls, under their guidance, we fallen souls, we make progress. So let us conclude that out of his mercy, Virabhadra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kshirodakshai Vishnu, who's actually the super soul who enters into the hearts of all living entities. That's one of the functions of Kshirodakshai Vishnu. He expands as the super soul into our hearts, into the heart of every living entity. He's the Godhead. But according to Kaviraja Goswami and others, he's playing the part of an ordinary being to show us the simple path to liberation. The path given by Caitanya Mahaprabhu, the path of Yuga Dharma, which is the simple chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We'll also quote Adi-lila chapter 11, verse number 11. Adyapi and Hare Kripa, Mahima Hoite, Chaitanya Nityananda Gai, Shakala Jagate. Interesting verse. It is by the glorious mercy of Sri Virabhadra Goswami or Goshai or Goswami that people all over the world now have the chance to chant the names of Chaitanya and Nityananda. Just see how important he is. I haven't heard many discussions on him actually, but listen to that verse. It is by the glorious mercy of Sri Virabhadra Goshai that people all over the world now have the chance to chant the names Chaitanya, Nityananda. And it's significant that Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami himself prayed very deeply to Virabhadra to be able to compose his epic Caitanya Caritamrita. Yes. This is apparent in Adi-lila chapter 11, text number 12. So many verses. Se Virabhadra Goshanira la inu sharana yanhara pashara hoy abhishta purana. Sweet language. I therefore take shelter. This is Kaviraja Goswami speaking, the author of Caitanya Caritamrita. I therefore take shelter of the lotus feet of Virabhadra Goswami, so that by his mercy, my great desire to write Sri Caitanya Caritamrita will be properly guided. Wow. Now, excuse me. I could not find any record for the exact year of Virabhadra's appearance in this world, but I did find the month. Because Vrindavan Das Thakur, he says that his mother, Vasudha, the wife of Lord Nityananda, carried him for 15 months in the womb. Then Vrindavan Das Thakur says, quote, at an auspicious moment, at an auspicious time of the day, on the day of Goddess Durga's awakening, or the 9th day of the dark fortnight of the month of Sharat, or the month of autumn, Vidachandra appeared by his own sweet will. Everyone floated in happiness upon his appearance. His effulgence was like that of a golden lotus. His movements and gestures were very graceful. His mother dressed him handsomely, and his arms extended down to his knees. His waist was slender like a lion's, and his chest was very broad. His beautiful lotus feet were marked with many auspicious signs, such as the flag, the thunderbolt, and a goad. He smiled profusely, and the sweetness of that smile was incomparable. So when Virabhadra grew from an infant into a toddler, toddlers means that they can kind of move around, they can crawl and start to walk. It's described he was even more attractive. Just like a lotus flower. When it's asleep, it's beautiful, but when it opens up, as it opens up, more beauty is revealed. So it's described as he was growing, he was becoming more beautiful, and many persons wanted his darshan. It's mentioned demigods would come incognito in the guise of saints and sadhus just to get a glimpse of him. And I was reading, one day, Lord Nityananda, his father, was sitting outside in his courtyard when he heard someone call out, "Oho, my elder brother, oho, my elder brother," from the entrance gate to his property. And who was that personality? It was the famous Abhiram Thakur. Abhiram Thakur. We hear a lot about Abhiram Thakur in Caitanya Caritamrita. Now, Abhiram is the cowherd boy Shuddhidam, Radharani's brother in Krishna Lila. But it's said that he appeared in Gora Lila in the self-same form that he is as a cowherd boy in Goloka. We've heard so many times how personalities, these divine personalities in Goloka, they appear as this and that and so forth. All divine, but very different. Sometimes the gopis become men. But this Abhiram, he came in the same form as a cowherd boy. And that's very evident in Vrindavan Das Thakur's description of him. Quote, he always carried a buffalo horn and a flute. He wore a crown of peacock feathers, gunjamala, and a flower garland. His ears were decorated with crocodile-shaped earrings, and his arms decorated with armlets. He wore a sash of bells around his waist and jingling anklets on his feet. His bodily complexion was like that of a golden Caitaki flower. We're hearing a lot about Caitaki flowers these days in our talks. And the Caitaki flower is a very beautiful flower. It has a very wonderful scent. It's, you could say, it's like a version of the kiwa flower. Those of you who are pujaris, you know that when we do puja, sometimes we add rose water to the bathing water. Sometimes we add that kera flower scent. You can buy them in the markets here in India. I don't think in the West, but very beautiful aroma. And this Caitaki flower, it's also known as, quote, the umbrella tree flower and the screw pine flower. Now this flower because I was interested. This flower was once cursed by Lord Shiva. It's a long story, but it was cursed. This flower was cursed by Lord Shiva, not to be used in any of his pujas, anything offered to him. You should never include this screw pine flower, this umbrella tree flower, this Caitanya flower. But after much pleading from his devotees, the Shiva bhaktas, much pleading, Shiva finally agreed. Okay, you can offer me this flower, but only on my appearance day, on Maha Shivaratri. So here in India, on that day, Shivaratri, I've seen that the price of these Caitanya flowers, they skyrocket throughout the country. Because all the Shiva bhaktas want to offer them to Lord Shiva on that particular day. Anyway, we'll move on from the flowers. Now, as Abhiram came into the courtyard, he was laughing. He's Avadut. Nityananda Prabhu welcomed him and embraced him. And Abhiram said, quote, "I've heard you have a new child. Please let me see him. I would like to pay him my obeisances." Now, Vasudha, Nitai's wife, who was nearby, overheard the conversation as she held, Virabhadra, the toddler, in her arms. So alarmed, she quickly handed Virabhadra to her sister, Janava Devi, and told her to run inside the house and hide. Why? Well, according to several shastras that I've read, it's well known that when Abhiram offered obeisances, quote, to deities that were not properly installed, or sometimes it's described, if he offered his obeisances to someone said they had a shalagram, but it wasn't really a shalagram, it would crack into many pieces. So in some scriptures it's mentioned that if he offered obeisances to deities that were not properly installed, a nice version, these deities would break into pieces. So anyway, out of motherly affection, Vasudha was understandably somewhat nervous about Abhiram offering his obeisances to her child, although we know he's the real deal, he's the real thing. But still, out of motherly affection, she's like worried. So, but Abhiram came into the house, and there was Janava Devi holding her sister's child, Virabhadra. So there's a nice detailed description that when Abhiram bowed down to pay obeisances to the toddler, this toddler, Virabhadra, kicked him so hard on his head, Abhiram's head, that he was thrown back 3 circles, 3 tumblings, and ended up sitting down rather than standing up. And but Abhiram, he smiled, because who wouldn't want to get kicked by the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And when he got up, he started singing and dancing wildly. Then Virabhadra, he climbed out of Janava Devi's arms, and he started walking for the first time. That's what toddlers do. And as he approached Abhiram, Virabhadra, he has different names, but Virabhadra, he raised his arms in the air, and his eyes were full of tears. Couldn't talk yet, but he's swaying back and forth, eyes, like in ecstasy, looking towards the heavens, looking beyond the heavens, looking to Vaikuntha, beyond Vaikuntha to Goloka. Virachandra, Virabhadra. And seeing this display of Virabhadra's divinity, it's described that Abhiram, quote, started floating on the waves of prem as he called out, Hari, Hari, Hari. It's the name of the Supreme. It means he who takes away all inauspiciousness. And then Abhiram left, dancing wildly down the road out of town. It's a nice fast time. Now when he got older, Virabhadra started thinking about initiation. Not because he required it. Remember, he's Shirdakshay Vishnu. But again, he's in the mood of a devotee to teach us the process of devotional service. So one day he called all his associates, and they all boarded a boat on the Ganges, and they headed for Shantipur. Now, when one of his associates asked why they were going to Shantipur, Virabhadra said, quote, "I want to take Diksha. I want to take initiation from Advaita Acharya." However, Janava Devi, back at her residence, these are transcendental personalities beyond our imagination. It's described, she knew Virabhadra's mind. She asked her servant, Chandrasekhar, to run down to the bank of the Ganges and call Virabhadra back. It's described she had a different plan in mind about his initiation. She's his aunt. So Chandrasekhar, he called his friend, who is Minikaitan Ramdas, to join him. Minikaitan Ramdas. And together they ran down to the bank of the Ganges. Now, this Minikaitan Ramdas, he used to carry a deity of Balaram wherever he went. He had a very strong body, Minikaitan Ramdas. And he would carry his deity on a very heavy simhasan, shringasan on his back. And I was reading that, but when he got older, it was difficult to carry this heavy shringasan on his back. So he entrusted the worship of his Balaram deity to a younger friend who was the head pujari for the Gauranga deity in Katwa. Katwa is where Lord Chaitanya entered into the renounced order of life. That's where he took sannyas. And if you've been there to that specific place, I've had the good fortune to have taken a parikrama party there. Beautiful temple. And there's a Gauranga deity there. So when he could no longer, got older, he couldn't carry this heavy deity and this heavy shringasan, he gave that deity to the Katwa temple. Just some information for you. So when Chandrasekhar and Ramdas arrived at the bank of the Ganges, Chandrasekhar called out very loudly several times, "Virabhadra, come back! Janava Devi says you must come back. Virabhadra, come back. Janava says that you have to come back." But Virabhadra and his associates were having a roaring kirtan. Whenever they had the opportunity, I kept reading, they were always having kirtan around them. It was an extra minute kirtan. Like Prabhupada said one time, if you got time, chant Hare Krishna. So they had kirtan. And they couldn't hear Chandrasekhar's, pleas. So Ramdas, who's described as, quote, an old flute-playing kirtaniya, who could perform mystical feats with his flute. He became angry. And he threw his flute at the boat that's, now some distance down the Ganges. And what happened? The flute broke the boat in half. So then Virabhadra, it's amazing. He very nonchalantly got off the sinking vessel and walked on the water back to the shore wearing his wooden sandals. He got off the boat, started walking on water with his wooden sandals, while all his associates jumped off the boat and swam to the bank of the Ganges. Now when Virabhadra arrived on the shore of the Ganges, he saw his mother's sister, Janava Devi, sitting some distance away, chanting the holy names on her japa beads. And when Janava Devi saw Virabhadra approaching her, because she didn't want, it's described, she didn't want to make an offense to the holy name by breaking her meditation during chanting. It's interesting. It was considered in those days, and why not these days, that one should not interrupt one's chanting of the holy names. The best thing is to just chant 16 rounds without getting distracted by this or that or the mind or the iPhone, whatever. Because she did not want to make an offense to the holy name by breaking her meditation during chanting, she manifested 2 extra pairs of arms. 2 extra pairs. And with 2 hands, she held her japa beads. With 2 hands, she covered her head with her sari. And the other 2 hands, she held a mace and a plow. And her entire body was effulgent with a beautiful complexion. Sadhuja. So after a few moments, she resumed her normal appearance. Now, having seen this incredible display of her divine nature, Virabhadra just fell at her lotus feet. His mother's sister, his aunt, Janava-Devi, and he said, quote, "If I have ever offended you, my dear Janava-Devi, please forgive me. And please, I beg you, initiate me into the sacred mantras in order to deliver me from this material existence." Yes. Mantras are always powerful, but if we want to achieve prema, love and devotion for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for Gauranitai, or for the divine couple of Radha and Krishna, for that we have to be initiated into the mantra. Chanting Hare Krishna mantra frees us, from bad karmic reactions, from our sins. It uproots our material desires and throws them to a distant place. Anyone who chants. But if we want prema, we have to get that mantra from a guru in disciplic succession. So important. One of the reasons we take initiation. So he's saying to her, and please, I beg you, initiate me into the sacred mantras in order to deliver me from this material existence. So right then and there, Janava-Devi initiated him, it's described, into the Gopal mantra. Right then and there. Durlabe sad guru namcha sakrit sangha upashtite tad anushcha yada labda sa dikshvarasho mahan. It's from the Tattva Shagara. I've quoted it many times. If by chance one gets a Sadguru, it doesn't matter whether one is in the temple or in the forest. If the Sadguru, the bona fide spiritual master, agrees, one can be initiated immediately without waiting for a suitable time or place. Of course, we have our rules in ISKCON, but sometimes like this, it's the exception to the rule. So after his initiation, such an important step in life, after his initiation, Virabhadra began thinking of marriage. Now we might wonder, he's such a great soul, why does he want to be married? He should just be free to travel and preach. But it's natural because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead and he's never separated from his eternal consorts. We must remember, as Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami said in Caitanya Caritamrita, Virabhadra is not different than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So one day Virabhadra said to his associates, it is time for me to enter family life. My eternal beloved consort is waiting for me. I shall go to Jagannath Puri to meet her. The Lord has his eternal consort, Vrindavaneshwari, Shrimati Radharani, and in his expansions in Vaikuntha, which are unlimited, in Vaikuntha, Narayan has Lakshmi, the divine couple. So the Lord is always meant to be with his consorts, divine consorts. One name of Radharani is Anapayini. Anapayani means she's never separated from her beloved Krishna. So this is all a very divine pastime. So he wants to rejoin his consort. So he said, it's time for me to enter family life. My eternal beloved is waiting for me. I shall go to Puri to meet her. So apparently that's where she is. So it takes, in the old days, it used to take about a month to walk from Bengal to Orissa. So after taking a month to walk, when he arrived in Puri, Virachandra, there were thousands of devotees to greet him. Shastra actually relates how the devotees saw him as he entered into Jagannath Puri. They saw him as, quote, the same enchanting form, the same character, the same ecstatic singing and dancing in Kirtan, and the same display of pure love as their very dear Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And again, Kaviraja Goswami said he's not different, so this makes sense. Now, while he was there, one day, he was walking near the seashore in Puri, as people do. And Virabhadra, he arrived at the house of a devotee called Sudamoy and his wife. And he just walked to that house, and he knocked on the door. And when Sudamoy opened the door, he saw Virabhadra, and he immediately offered obeisances. Then Virabhadra, he said, quote, "Dear sir, whatever you have kept from me, please bring it now," unquote. Whatever you have kept from me, you please bring it now. So Sudamoy is like a poor brahmana. He said, "Sir, I'm very poor and fallen. What can I give you? But please come and see for yourself if there's anything in my humble house, my hut, that you desire." So Virabhadra followed him in to his humble dwelling, and he saw Sudamoy's daughter worshipping Shalagram Shila with sandalwood paste and a fragrant garland. Shastra describes she was none other than Lakshmi Devi herself, who manifested, as we know, from the ocean of milk. So the Shastra says, quote, "Now her eternal consort, Lord Narayan himself, in the form of Virabhadra, had come to meet her," unquote. So Sudamoya's bliss knew no bounds. And he realized that, his good fortune at having, soon to be having Virabhadra as his son-in-law. But then he expressed some sadness to Virabhadra. He said, quote, "Sir, I'm unable to provide a proper dowry. Being very poor, I can only give you 5 haritaki fruits." It's a fruit we have in Orissa, haritaki. He said, "My dowry is 5 haritaki fruits." So Virabhadra smiled. He said, "So be it." But on the day of the Vivaha Yagya, the wedding, I was reading, there was a big, huge function. The Supreme Personality of God is getting married, so it was a big one. But on the day of that wedding, as everyone was being seated, everyone noticed a certain guest who sat, somewhere towards the back of the function. And no one could recognize who he was. But one person said, "I saw him coming from the direction of the ocean." And then the Shastra reveals this distinguished guest was none other than Varunadev, the Lord of the Seas, disguised as an ordinary mortal. And just before the ceremony began, he approached Virabhadra and he said, quote, "My Lord, whatever you require for dowry, I will provide. Today I've become most fortunate, for I have seen the divine couple, Lakshmi Narayan." Then, hidden from the vision of all, Yogamaya, except you could say enlightened souls. Varuna manifests all kinds of riches. Just they kept, by his mystic power, kept pouring forth in front of Virabhadra. All kinds of riches like precious stones and exquisite jewelries, gold items, silver items, and it's also mentioned many types of opulent foodstuffs. And there he had the dowry. Of course, he himself could have manifested as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but devotees are always eager to serve the Lord. And of course, the demigods are servant of the Lord. So Varuna felt very happy that he could provide the dowry. This is love, and exchanges of love. So then, many celestial demigods, rishis and munis, they appeared in disguise, and they mixed with the guests. And I read that Mohini Murti even appeared. She's not in the category of devata. She's in the category of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. She appeared, and she dressed and decorated the bride Narayani. That was the name of the girl who was worshipping Shalagram Srila in the house of that Grihastra. Forgot to mention her name. She's Lakshmi, but in this pastime her name is Narayani. And then Varuna, he personally dressed the bridegroom, Virabhadra. So now Virabhadra and Narayani, Lakshmi and Narayan, they're ready for this function. And it commenced. It was a big affair, but time is short, so after the wedding, Narayani, the goddess of fortune, born in the home of a simple brahmana there on the alongside the seashore in Puri, who was dedicated to just worshipping the Lord in the Shalagram Shila. Then her eternal consort walks in the house. I want your hand. Yes. So after the wedding, the couple mounted a beautiful palanquin, and they headed north back to Bengal, to the town of Kardaka. That was their home, Kardaka. And it's described that the devotees who accompanied them had a continuous rousing kirtan of the Maha Mantra all the way back. So we're talking about a month here. They'd never stopped kirtan. It just, the roaring kirtan was going on. Now, when they got back home to that town, at that time in history, they had their residence there. At that time in history, there was a huge settlement of 1,200 Buddhist monks living in that town. Now, they were known as Nadas or Naras. And actually, Buddhism was quite prominent in India for, well, a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years. I was reading even in Mathura at one time, it was mainly Buddhists, externally. But Buddhism was eventually pretty much moved out of India to other places. But at this time, there in India, in Bengal, there were a lot of Buddhist colonies. And they were called Nadas or Naras. And in this particular town, due to their difficult austerities and strict renunciation, these Buddhist monks had acquired great mystic powers. Unfortunately, it went to their heads. And they were inimical and very disrespectful to the Vaishnavas. And one day, a number of these Nadas came to Virabhadra's residence, and they demanded to be fed. So hearing this, Vasudha's sister, again, our beloved Janavadevi, she said to them, yes, but please wait a while. We're still cooking for the deity, and the deity has not yet received his offering of foodstuffs. After he eats, we will feed you. But the Nadas, they refused to wait. They said, quote, our stomachs are burning with hunger. You must feed us right away or we will punish you. Now, Janavadevi didn't reply to their angry words. When she didn't reply to their angry words, the Nadas pronounced a deadly curse. She just remained silent. I mean, it was so offensive. She agreed to feed them, but after the deity took prasad. But, the Buddhists don't believe in a supreme personality of Godhead, so they just criticized. She didn't say anything. She didn't do anything. So not seeing or taking any immediate action, they cursed. They said, then let there be fire. Let there be fire. And within a moment, the entire residence of Virabhadra and Narayani was on fire. And terrified, all the different devotees, they began scattering everywhere. Janavadevi, Vasudha, there's a big family, extended family there. So seeing this destruction going on, Virabhadra, who was sitting in the house, he's just sitting in the house, he quickly gets up, and simply by his glancing at the fire, immediately was extinguished. And everything that had been burned was restored to its original state. Not hard to understand, but wonderful what the Lord has done. Just like he swallowed the forest fire that was endangering his devotees in Vrindavan, the cowherd boys. So in this case, the Buddhists created this just by their mantras, let there be fire. He looked, fire stopped, everything restored to its original state. So then, it's written that, referring to Virabhadra, quote, he by whose slight movement of his eyebrows, by the slight movement of his eyebrows, the whole universe can be destroyed, decided to chastise the Nadas in a way that would deprive them of their power and remove their pride. So what did he do? Virabhadra, what did he do? It said, quote, employing his deluding potency, Maya, he instantly manifested 1,300 very beautiful illusory women called Nadis. There's the Nadas, and now we have the Nadis, who were in the prime of their youth. And seeing the attractive Nadis in front of them, the Naras became captivated by their beauty, these strict renunciates who had been so offensive. And then Virabhadra, then he called over these Naras one by one, and gave each one of them one or two Nadis, one or two beautiful girls in the prime of their youth. And all these, who had previously been strict renunciates with mystic powers, all the Naras went away and became materialistic householders. But a few of the Naras escaped, and they hid in the water of the Ganges by dint of their mystic powers for 2 months. And during that time they reflected on their behavior. They had time to reflect on their behavior. And they realized their offensive nature. So after 2 months, they came out and they found Virabhadra. They fell at his lotus feet. They surrendered to him. They expressed remorse, and they agreed to take up the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. They became Paka Vaishnavas. Actually, they became known as, quote, Samyogi Vaishnavas. I looked it up. This particular group of Nadas, they remained renunciates. They became known as the Samyogi Vaishnavas. Samyogi Vaishnavas. And I was reading later on that they would often accompany Virabhadra on his preaching tours. He's so merciful. Now, after being properly initiated and properly married to his beautiful wife, Narayani, Virabhadra began traveling and preaching throughout Bengal. Now you can imagine how powerful our acharyas are when they travel and preach. What about Shirodakshai Vishnu? And he was traveling throughout Bengal. And it's written that these Samyogi Vaishnavas who accompanied him on his travels in his entourage, they very quickly became maddened in love and made great advancement by performing Harinam Sankirtan. And I read that they were often dancing like mad lions, screaming out, Haribol, 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 Gauritai, Gauranga, 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 while they played various musical instruments like the mridanga, the mandira, the dampfa, the kartals, and the shringas. Don't know what a shringa is, but in those days they had musical instruments. Interesting. Those special part. That's some yogi Vaishnavas. They were atheistic Buddhists. They became so ecstatic as some yogi Vaishnavas. All by kripa, all by mercy. So sometimes Virabhadra traveled by palanquin, and sometimes he traveled by horse carriage. And I was reading that his palanquin, because it's interesting, the details, right? His palanquin was decorated with silver and golden ribbons, and Virabhadra's ears were always decorated with pearl earrings. And on his hand, he wore a ring that included a very brightly shining Chandrabhasha gem. Chandra is the moon. A Chandrabhasha gem. And his reddish body, it's described that reddish body or golden, different descriptions, was covered with silk cloth, and on his chest he wore a golden sacred thread, Brahman thread. And his moon-like face was always decorated with a gentle smile. And his golden and tender limbs radiated an astonishing effulgence. And Vrindavan Das Thakur says that he, quote, continuously gave loving devotion to Krishna to anyone he met on his way. If by chance or by good fortune you came across this path, you became swept up in the tsunami of Sri Krishna's Sankirtan. Just like us. We were all swept up by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. Everyone. Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He gets the credit even 10,000 years from now. We all come in contact with him in various ways, and he sweeps us off our feet by the mercy of the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. This is the most precious gift that Prabhupada has given, along with all the other gifts. So when he traveled like this, he continuously, Virachandra, he would continuously, Virabhadra, give this loving devotion to Krishna, to everyone on his way. Virabhadra. He would tell them, the people, chant the name of Gaur, worship Gaur, and become a loving servant of Gaura. Keep Nityananda's feet in your heart and eternally relish the love of Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. Virabhadra. And as the Kirtan party was going from village to village, Nagar Sankirtan, his associates carried banners of many sizes, shapes and colors, red, white, black, and yellow, bearing the symbols of the sun and the moon. And there was always continuous kirtan, day and night. A sound, the sound of which penetrated through the heavenly, earthly, and underground realms. You know, when these devotees did kirtan, the sound penetrated through the heavenly, earthly, and underground realms. And then it's stated by Vrindavan Das Thakur, quote, thus the residents of the earthly realm, the demigods in heavenly planets, the snake people of the underworld, and even the residents of hell, Patalok, all responded enthusiastically by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. It came back as an echo from hell. They would chant Hare Krishna, and they would come back, the residents of hell. They would also chant Hare to come back like an echo, which resounded everywhere. You get an echo from hell, you get an echo from heaven, you get an echo from the earthly beings. Now, in this entourage that Virabhadra was taking around, a Jnanadas and a Krishnadas were two of Virabhadra's most intimate associates. They always were next to him. And but specifically Nityananda Das and Ramai Thakur, they walked right next to the palanquin. And the chief of the Naras, remember the Buddhists, now some yogi Vaishnavas, their chief, his name was, he got the name Nrsimhadas. He was the one who led the entire procession, this Samyogi Vaishnava, this offensive Buddhist who was delivered. He was very proud. He got the name Nrsimhadas. And he was always in front of the Sankirtan procession, leading the procession. We will go here. We're going to chant. Everyone dance. Like a Sankirtan leader. Just see the mercy. A fallen atheist, offensive person, but realized his mistakes. Virabhadra accepted him, and he was empowered to become the leader of the Harinam party. Now we've got Nityananda Das, Ramai Thakur, we've got Jnana Das, Krishna Das. These are some of the people that were around Virabhadra in this traveling procession. And what does Vrindavan Das Thakur say about them? Quote, "By taking shelter of any one of them, one can overcome the disease of material existence. Bhavaroga," it said, Bhavaroga, and transcend the three modes of material nature. By taking shelter of any one of these Vaishnavas, one can overcome the disease of material existence and transcend the three modes of material nature. Now Nityananda Das, this is Nityananda Das, a servant, whom we just mentioned, he was a disciple of, also a disciple of Janavadevi, Nityananda Das. And I was reading that when he was just a child, both his parents died. And Janavadevi appeared to him in a dream. And she said, "Come to Kardaha and receive the divine mantra from me." So now this Nityananda Das, many of you may know, he's the author of the famous book Prem Vilas, which we often refer to. It's also said that he is the author of a book called Shri Virachandra Charita, about Virabhadra, Virachandra. But unfortunately, it's been lost. Virachandra Charita, about our Virabhadra. It's been lost. How many books have been lost? So, as Virabhadra continued traveling and preaching throughout his life, after some time, he would return from time to time to Kardaha. He would return to his residence from time to time. And there's a nice pastime how he established the deity, or a deity of Shamasundar in Kardaha. Famous place. Devotees sometimes, Mayapur, our devotees in Mayapur, they sometimes go to this Kardaha. So there's a very beautiful deity of Shamasundar there, Radha Shamasundar. So how did that deity come there? Because you may want to travel from Mayapur to go there. Many pastimes happen there. Well, how that deity came about is very interesting. One time the Muslim king of that area, he wanted to test Virabhadra's power. Now what's a Muslim king doing there? Well, if you read CC, you read how many Muslims, with due respect, are in India at that time. So many times, Mahaprabhu or different devotees are inconvenienced in their travels by the Muslim emperors. India was actually ruled by Muslims for 600 years. And I was reading the economy of India at that time was so rich under Muslim rule that India was often referred to in foreign countries as the golden bird. I never knew that before. Because we're talking about other countries, how they see India. So during Muslim rule, for whatever reason, it was quite opulent, and because they often exploited the original Vedic culture, but be that as they may, India was referred to as the golden bird. So this Muslim king, who's king of this area, he'd heard a lot about Virabhadra's powers. So he wanted to test him. So on 3 occasions, this Muslim ruler, he sent Virabhadra trays of cooked food containing meat covered by a cloth. There's vegetables and fruits, but then there would be meat to hide it, covered by cloth. Very offensive. However, each time the devotees removed the cloth, the meat turned out to be a tray of very beautiful, fragrant flowers on 3 occasions. So when the Muslim king realized the power of this, of our Virabhadra, he also realized he had offended him. And he came one day and surrendered. And he asked Virabhadra which gift he could give him to, resolve this offense that he'd made. So Virabhadra thought for a minute. He said, "You can give me the center stone on the gate of your mosque." Because they had big mosques in those days, very opulent. So our Virabhadra, he says, "Give me the center stone that's on the gate of the gate of the mosque." And it's a huge, apparently it was a very big stone, black stone. So the Muslim king, he gave it to him. And what did Virabhadra do? He made 3 deities out of that big, beautiful black stone. And he installed them. He made the deity of Shamasundar in Kardaha. He made the deity of Nandalal in Sharbona. If you go to Sharbona, you'll see the deity of Nandalal. And he made the deities of Sri Radha Ballabha in Mahesh. Apparently these towns are nearby. 3 deities out of this black stone. Yes, so Virabhadra's exploits in spreading the holy names all over Bengal could fill volumes of books. We don't have that time now. But we can understand the secret of his success in his own words. How was he said? Well, he's Shirodakshai Vishnu. But the secret of his success we can understand from his own words and take inspiration from them. Shastra says, quoting him, quote, "I will wander throughout the world, and wherever I see anyone opposing bhakti, I will manifest my forearm form and destroy them with my chakra weapon. Whoever does not take to the path of devotion, as given to us by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, will be destroyed by time on account of their material desires. Time will take care of them. Let it be known I'm equal to all, but nevertheless I will wander with divine love in one hand and chastisement in the other." So we have our choices. As human beings, we can take the chastisement of the Lord in the form of, time. Time and tide wait for no man. Krishna says, "I am time." Manifestation of the Supreme, it'll catch up. So we can take Krishna like that. Or here he's saying, "I will wander with divine love in one hand." So we can pray for that divine love from this divine personality. Virabhadra, the son of Lord Nityananda. So after preaching for many years, Virabhadra decided it was time for him to visit Vrindavan Dham. And we're speaking about our acharyas who spent time in Braj. It wasn't our initial plan to discuss all these personalities, but somehow it's manifested that we are. And thank the Lord that we are, because through their teachings and through their example, we get a very deeper understanding of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Now, as soon as Virabhadra arrived, it was a long walk again from Bengal. When he arrived in Vrindavan, who greeted him? Jiva Goswami, as he so often did for senior devotees or special personalities. He was there to greet him. Again, our culture. And he was accompanied by Sri Krishnadas Kaviraja, who we heard earlier gives so much glorification of Virabhadra in Caitanya Caritamrita. And very soon, after he had arrived, the famous Madhu Pandit also came to greet him. And when all these personalities were together, they said to Virabhadra, "What would you like to do?" And it was very interesting when I read it. His reply was very much the same as we heard Janavidevi request when she first arrived in Vrindavan. So what did Virabhadra say? "Oh, please take me to see the Vrindavan deities." So nice. Vrindavans, there's 5,000 temples, we heard. Probably more now. But he wanted to see, at that time there were, of course, 7 principal temples. So he said, "I want to see the Vrindavan deities. I want to see Krishna." So Bhakti Ratnakara says, quote, "Taking Virabhadra with them, all these exalted souls joyfully went to see the deities in their temples. And who amongst them was not overcome with ecstasy?" Just to see those deities, they experienced ecstatic symptoms. When, oh when will that day be ours? My dear Lord, you're not a statue, you're directly the son of Maharaj Nanda. So after having, first having darshan of the Lord of that place, Braj, the next day, Virabhadra took permission from Bhugarbha Goswami and Jiva Goswami to begin touring the greater Braj Mandala. And from what I could ascertain, going through pages and pages and pages of the places he visited, over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks, he visited, let us say, each and every place that we've covered in our 12 months of Vrindavan Katha and more. I was there. I was reading. Oh, he went there. I also went there. We went there. We went there. Fortunately, by Prabhupada's grace, we have knowledge of these places, and we've also been to these divine Leela stans. And how much more they will mean to us. When Kartik, opens up against for all of us, we'll go there and we'll chant and dance in ecstasy, roll in the dust. I'm sure we'll see some tears. So, yes, that was his. Spent, a month or more, some months actually, in Vrindavan, visiting the deities, going to the holy places. He already took a bath in all the holy kunds and the Jamuna River, and discussed Krishna Katha and the banyan trees and all these transcendental places, and spent time with Jiva Goswami and Madhu Pandit and all these. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, obviously that's why Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami appeals to him before writing Caitanya Caritamrita to please give his blessings. So then Bhakti Ratnakara relates, quote, "At the time of Virabhadra's departure from Vrindavan, everyone gathered around him. And when he had walked a short distance, everyone began to cry. Virabhadra himself was soaked from his own tears. And again he bid farewell to everyone. He said goodbye many times to each person. Finally he became peaceful, and then he left for Mathura, and from Mathura he walked back to Bengal." Now our beloved Virabhadra concluded his manifest pastimes on this earth during a visit to Ekachaka, the birthplace of his father, Lord Nityananda, by merging into the Bankim Rai deity. It's a beautiful deity there, Bankim Rai. Entered into that deity. And his samadhi in the Bankim Rai temple, it's there in that compound. You can go. You can see Virabhadra's samadhi. Pretty amazing. So that's maybe 4 hours from our Mayapur temple. You can say, I heard this lecture about Virabhadra and all his transcendental exploits and his divine personality and his wife, and I heard about his marriage and how he defeated all these atheists and made the Samyogi Vaishnavas, so many things. You can go there and take darshan of his samadhi. So we'll conclude today with words of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, glorifying Virabhadra. These are found in Srila Prabhupada's purport to Caitanya Caritamrita, again, Adi Leela chapter 11, in verse number 8, a verse that we quoted. Prabhupada writes a purport, but he quotes his Guru Maharaj. A little technical, but I think it's let's hear from on Prabhupada's, as Prabhupada expressed his desire, let's hear about Virabhadra from Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. What better way to conclude this lecture? So I'm quoting. Prabhupada says, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhasya, and now another quote, Virabhadra Goswami was the direct son of Srila Nityananda Prabhu and a disciple of Janavi, as we explained. His real mother was Vasudha. In the Gora Gunadesha Dipika, text number 67, he is mentioned as an incarnation of Shiradakshaya Vishnu. Therefore, Virabhadra Goswami is non-different from Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur goes on. Some more detailed information. He said, in a village of the name Jamatpura, in the district of Hooghly, Virabhadra Goswami had a disciple named Yadunathacharya, who had two daughters, a real daughter named Srinimati and a foster daughter named Narayani. Virabhadra married both these daughters, and they are mentioned in the Bhakti Ratnakara, 13th wave. Of course, I only mentioned one, Narayani, but he also married Srimati. He had two weddings, but I just went into one wedding. Interesting. And then he concludes, Virabhadra had three disciples who were celebrated as his sons, Gopijana Ballabha, Ramakrishna, and Ramachandra. The youngest, Ramachandra, belonged to the Shandilya dynasty and had the surname, Vat of Yala. It's a tricky one. He established his family in Kardaha, and its members are known as the Goswamis of Kardaha. The eldest disciple, Gopijana Ballabha, was a resident of a village known as Lata, near the Manakara railway station in the district of Burdwan. The second, Ramakrishna, lived near Maladaha in a village named Gayashpura. Hare Krishna, unquote. A little technical, but historic information about this great divine incarnation of Virabhadra, who appeared as a humble devotee. And like many others, spread the chanting of Hare Krishna throughout Bengal and that part of India. And we, our humble selves, we've inherited that mission. a mission that's headed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself in many forms, and very illustrious personalities who've come all the way from the topmost planet in the spiritual sky, Goloka Vrindavan, and each through different generations of devotees made the contribution that would eventually manifest as the worldwide society, of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, headed by our beloved Srila Prabhupada. And each in our own ways, we're maintaining that Sankirtan. We're keeping it going. This is a movement. It's moving forward. We're trying our best. Sometimes we're incompetent. Sometimes we make mistakes. But we're praying to become pure devotees. Why? Not so that we'll become famous and whatever, but so that we'll be proper instruments in the hands of our beloved Srila Prabhupada. It may take lifetimes, but that's okay. If Srila Prabhupada is happy, then we'll be happy. So yes, this was really interesting for me. When I first started researching about Virabhadra, I couldn't find very much, but I kept praying, where do I go? Where do I look? And I found this information, and I hope that it's been a great source of satisfaction to all of you. You've learned more about Virabhadra, the illustrious son of Lord Nityananda and Vasudha. So thank you. Next talk, how about Srila Krishnadas Kaviraja Goswami? Please, everyone, give me your blessings. I'm not qualified for this. There's persons who could do this much better than me. Please give me your blessings that I can find enough information to bring satisfaction to all of your hearts and glorify Him properly. See you in a couple days. Shri Krishna Sankirtan ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Virabhadra Goshai ki, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari, Shrimati Radharani ki, Goloka Vrindavan Dhamma ki. Take everybody that didn't make it back to Godhead 500 years ago, back home, back to Godhead, where we'll all assemble at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada, that master at whose feet all masters sit. Thank you, Prabhus. Hare Krishna. Jai Jai Sisi Radhe, Sham Sham Sham, Vrindavan Dham.